welcome to a rather festive edition of the Good Dram Show with me, Chris Goodrum. Right, well, this sort of time of year, one has a tendency to sort of like crack open the good stuff, relax, and sort of like enjoy your nice old malt whiskey, and certainly judging by the amount of interesting and rather good bottlings that sell through the shop and online this Christmas time, quite a number of you did. So, but as you know, I'm not one for convention, no, definitely not. So, this evening's tasting will be the Axis of Evil tasting. I know quite a few of you have been waiting for this, and it's probably a subject that's, in all seriousness, is probably worth tackling. Now, before we start, I would like to say that this is purely my own composition, or the Axis of Evil is purely my own thing, and it was basically the members, should we say, of said club, and they're purely on my own personal preference, my own personal taste. But one thing I will say is it's the quality and the consistently, shall we say, not particularly great quality of these particular whiskies that has led me to dub them the Axis of Evil. So, anyway, who is in this fabled club? Well, starting at the top in alphabetical order, we have Deanston. Now, Deanston is just as hard as nails. It really is not a particularly easy malt to get on with. Quite industrial, like I said, really hard, a bit spirity, and it's just not a nice whiskey. I mean, if you're thinking of a whiskey to relax with and just sort of purely enjoy rather than something you have to endure, then Deanston is certainly not one of them. I will give it that after Burn Stewart mucked around with their range and upping the ABV and all that, it's kind of improved a little bit, but still it's just, not exactly a great malt. Distillery number 2 on the list is Dufftown. Now again, Dufftown is yet another one of those distilleries that produces whiskey that's just hard as nails. It's industrial, it can verge on the sort of like spirity and nasty. But in saying that, I have tasted some pleasant Dufftown, and I think with these kind of distilleries that have an industrial kind of character, a hard character, it needs some softening up. Now sometimes the use of, say, a wine cask or a sherry cask or something like that kind of sort of softens up the edges a little bit. And what you want is you want a bit of sweetness, because neither of them, certainly when they're aged in bourbon cask, certainly don't tend to have a particular barley sweetness which kind of offsets that. So you're looking for sort of sweetness from other sources, like I said, from, say, a cask finish, a rum cask finish or a sherry cask finish, which will add a little bit of sweetness, which kind of like, offsets somewhat that industrial kind of character. But so Dufftown is number 2. Like I said, purely this is alphabetical order. Number 3 begins with F. And I think you know which distillery that is. It's my favourite distillery, Old Fettercairn, or otherwise known as Old Fettercairn. If you like your whiskey to sort of reek of burning tyres and burnt rubber, and I'm not talking about in a pleasant Ilery kind of rubbery way, then that's Fettercairn in a nutshell, basically. It is truly, well, I wouldn't use the word dreadful, but it's a shocking malt, really. And let's put it this way. I mean, I'm going to get a lot of stick for this, I know. And like I said, this is purely a personal thing, and I've got obviously nothing against the distilleries whatsoever, and I'm sure they work really hard. But Fettercairn is just truly. Anyway. Next on the list, number 4 on the list, is probably quite surprising to some, but it's Macduff. Now, I've coined the phrase, my palate has been Macduffed up again, because Macduff truly released some real stinkers, it has to be said. And even the distillery bottling, the Glendeveron 10, used to be, well, alright, it kind of had this sort of interesting sort of petrol, diesel, boiled sweets kind of character, which I suppose is intriguing from an interest point of view, but it's not something that you really want to drink. And it's kind of, again, it's another one of those whiskies that's just really hard work, and I just find it more of a, well, you know, a chore, I guess, than a pleasure sort of tasting some of these whiskies. But you know, whenever I do taste these whiskies, and I will point this out, that I don't prejudge, and I'm always hopeful that when I come across one of those sort of whiskies, they're going to surprise me, you know. And finally, the last, number 5, the last one on the list is good old Tobermory. Oh, Tobermory. Whenever I taste Tobermory, it just stinks of wet cardboard, and it's just, I don't know what they do. I really do not know what they do. I guess they must push the stills too hard. Maybe, you know, they take a little bit of a wide cut, so you get, you know, a little bit sort of like too much of the feints, or maybe the foreshorts, or what have you, sort of into the final distillate. But it's always the same. It is always just wet cardboard. And as for the peated bottling leche that they do, it's kind of like, you know, peat and wet cardboard. It's just sort of, you know, not nice, not good. And you know, like I said, this is purely a personal thing, and I guess those are my reasonings behind why those distilleries are members of the Axis of Evil. I will point out that one distillery is absent, and that distillery is Tullibardine, and as you probably know from reading my newsletters, I coined the phrase to do a Tully, which is to basically be promoted from the Axis of Evil. This was all really down to one particular tasting when I tasted the range, which the sales rep left me, and I can only assume that, you know, the bottles had not been particularly well stored. They'd either got contaminated, they'd been left in the boot of a car for God knows how long, and they were shockingly bad. They really were rough. Subsequently, I retasted their range, and, you know, showed a distinct improvement. Although I forget which bottling in particular, it might have been the sherry finish. It's still not a particularly great whiskey, but Tullibardine is a bit like Dufftown, in that it is a bit of an industrial whiskey, but certainly the two wood finishes they have out at the moment, the Sauternes finish and the Banyuls finish, just like I said, they add that little bit of sweetness, which kind of balances out the sort of slightly hard kind of character of the malt. So, like I said, you know, maybe one of these days, one of these 5 distilleries will do a Tully, and one will, you know, take its place. I mean, there are a number of distilleries that sort of produce, dare I say it, bland whiskey. There's a number of those, which obviously I'm not going to get into, but just because the whiskey is bland, it's not particularly bad whiskey, but, you know, there is a lot of bland whiskey about there. So anyway, I think that's enough of the waffle, and shall I introduce this evening's lineup then? Right, okay, so the lineup. As you can see, I've got 5 glasses in front of me. I have a sample of each of those particular distilleries' whiskies. I'm not going to reveal the provenance of them. I'm not going to say whether they are distillery bottled or privately bottled. I think I'm probably going to get enough grief as it is for this kind of hit list. I don't want to add grief from the independents or whoever may well have bottled these particular ones as well as. So I'll introduce each of them. I'll give you the date of distillation and bottling, the age, the ABV. I mean, most of these tasting notes you can find on my WordPress blog anyway, so you can probably do some homework and some detective work. But anyway, so the first one, this is the first one is Dufftown. This was distilled in 1995, bottled in 2008. That's making it a 13-year-old from a refill sherry cask, and bottled at its natural cask strength of 60.8. Yeah, 60.8. Whew, a cask strength sherry cask Dufftown. Whew. Yeah, right. Okay, that's going to be interesting. or Deanston even, sorry. Right, the Dufftown was distilled in 1976, bottled in February of 2012, thus making it 35 years old. Bourbon cask and bottled at 58%. So let's see what that one's like. This one in the strangely different glass. Unfortunately, I have a tendency. Have you noticed that Glencairns have a tendency to break very easily? Hence why this one. Right, so the Fettercairn, this was distilled in 2000, bottled in 2011, thus making it 10 years old, and was bottled at 46%. This one, again, as you can see, bourbon cask. This one, another bourbon cask. This is a Macduff, distilled in 1990, bottled in 2011 again, thus making it 21 years old, bottled at 50%. And finally, Tobermory. You'd have thought, looking at the colour, that was from a sherry cask, but in actual fact it is a bourbon cask. Distilled in 1994, bottled in 2009, that's making it a 15-year-old, and again bottled at 46%. So let's just see what we get on, and hopefully, I mean, you know, we'll see how they go. You know, I mean, they'll obviously show the characters that I'm hoping to sort of like get across to you, but you know, one or two of them might actually be quite nice. I don't know. It's been a long time since I've probably tasted this sort of lot. So anyway, enough of that. Shall we make a start then? Right, okay, so let's start with the Deanston then. So like I said, 13 years old, refill sherry, cask strength. Okay, let's go. Right, it's kind of, yeah, there's a lot of sherry cask obviously. It's that sort of sweet, slightly toffee, slightly sort of tobacco-y leaf kind of sherry. And then there's some real hard spirit. It's almost like a vodka. It's almost like a sort of, you know, you've stuck a vodka in a sherry cask. Really spirity. Hard. I mean, you feel the sort of the hardness of the vapours in your nose. It really is. I mean, yeah, okay, that's kind of not helped by the fact that it's 60.8%. But it really is kind of not particularly well integrated, shall we say. You've got, like I said, on one hand you've got some clean sherry, we'll give it that, clean sherry, but the spirit is just sort of not integrated at all. It's just kind of like, you know, there. I mean, all the aromas are really sort of sherry cask derived. Like I said, tobacco, a little bit of burnt leaf, cigar smoke, dried fruit, but God, it's got some alcohol, I can tell you that for a start. Right, power then. Tannic, hard, the voice is going. Lots of sherry. Again, it's all the flavours are sherry cask derived. You've got lots of licorice, a bit of toffee, a little bit of tobacco. No real sort of spirit character whatsoever, apart from this just intense alcohol. Probably should have left a bit in there, done a little bit with some water, but that is just sort of real heavy going. And I mean, yeah, I think you can probably safely say you stick a little bit of water with that, and that's just going to be, you know, again, it's just going to be all sherry cask. Hard, industrial, but you know, you don't really tell very much of that because it's just kind of like all sherry, and that's pretty much all you're going to get out of that one. So, although, you know, you can argue it's not a particularly bad whiskey nose aside, I suppose. but it's certainly not one that you would say, I'm definitely enjoying this one. Right, okay, on to the Dufftown. Like I said, distilled in 1976, bottled in 2012, 35 years old. This should hopefully be quite nice. Well, we'll see, won't we? Again, it's very industrial. You can tell it's got some maturity, but the spirit is not really showing a great deal of maturity. The oak is showing a lot of maturity. Slightly sawdusty, a little bit of dried fruit, plums. There is some honeyed sweetness, and that honey does have a slightly mature character to it. So, but again, it's got that sort of faintly gin-like, junipery, botanical character. It feels like maybe the spirit is slightly moving away from the wood. But it's actually, it's not really unpleasant. It's no denying it's Dufftown. It's no denying it's as hard as nails. But that sort of slightly honeyed character is like I was saying earlier, kind of sort of balancing it out a little bit. If it didn't have that sort of honeyed note to it, again it would just be a really difficult whiskey to get on with. Not saying that it isn't particularly, but some nice chocolate now, a bit of caramel, slightly fudgy. Again, most of the aromas are mature oak and lightly oxidisation notes. But it's okay. I mean, take it in as context for a Dufftown. This is not too bad at all. So, now then. That is wonderfully mature in actual fact. Has a sort of a Glen Grant kind of, or an old Glen Grant kind of character, sort of lightly sawdusty, mature, coffeed, honey. Again, the spirit on the end, right on the finish, is a little bit on the hard side, but there's a little bit of a floral note, a little bit of violets, it's complex, whereas the Deanston was pretty straightforward. The Dufftown certainly has, an element of complexity to it. And there's plenty of other flavours going on to kind of compensate for the, the distillery character. And to be honest with you, that's basically what you're looking for with these kind of whiskies. Like I keep saying, you're looking for a balancing element to balance out the the somewhat hard industrial character of the spirit itself. So quite leafy, long, it's nice. That's pleasantly mature. So maybe I have tasted one or two interesting Dufftowns, and every now and again it certainly surprises me. But I certainly give the praise where it's due. I don't think it's ready yet to do a Thule, so to speak, because it is pretty heavy going. So, but this particular bottling, not too bad at all. Right, okay, on to the Fettercairn. I wonder if this will have plenty of distillery character. What did I say it was? It's pretty young. It's only 10 years old. Bottled at 46%. This is probably going to, if nothing, it's going to show up, the true character of the spirit. So let's find out, shall we? God dear. It smells like it's practically just come off the still. Oily cereal, rubbery. There's a little bit of faintiness. I mean, difficult to say, really. I mean, this is just bottled far too young, really. It's just all oily cereal and youthfulness. And that's pretty much about all you're getting. Yeah, it's a hard whiskey, but it's just practically like you just smell one as it came straight off the still. So yeah, no real complexity. A little bit of paint thinners possibly. I mean, there is a sweetness-ish to the cereal. It's kind of got a sort of plumpness, I guess, the cereal, but it's just oily and there's just nothing there really. Powder. Oh, oily, watery, horribly confected. God dear. Ooh. No, yeah, again, young, cereally, oily. It's just got this weird confectionery sort of sweetness. It's just all over the place. Your mouth is just going, what the hell is going on? I've got this kind of strange sweet taste and a bit of bitterness and a faint bit of rubber and oil and cereal and God, why on earth would you want to drink that for enjoyment? I mean, that is, frightening. I mean, it's not bad. I mean, he says after just saying all of that, it is what it is. I mean, Fettercairn is never going to be an elegant malt. It is a workhorse. It's a sort of, it's basically, I want some alcohol, and at this kind of age, I mean, you would have thought 10 years old, it would have sort of started to show some maturity, started to round out, but it tastes like it's about half its age, it really does. And personally, I wouldn't have bottled it. I mean, you can argue that, well, it's indicative of the style of the distillery, it's interesting from that point of view. But, the vast majority of people don't buy whiskey to sort of see what they're like, to be interested. They buy whiskey to enjoy, to sort of, and this is the point. I mean, I could quite happily sort of taste these whiskies because from a not scientific point of view, but from a sort of an analytical point of view, they are really, really interesting. And I like to get under the skin of a distillery, find out what the style is, but most people that are spending, say, 30, 40, 50 quid, don't particularly want to do that. That they want a whiskey that they're going to enjoy. They want me to sell them a whiskey that they're going to enjoy, and hand on heart, I couldn't sell that. I could probably sell that to sort of the sort of customer that is looking for something interesting and is maybe sort of, but then I mean, I wouldn't part with 30 quid for a bottle of that. I mean, it's sort of a bottle that I just wouldn't want to drink. I'd probably taste it once and go, yeah, okay, that's interesting. That's what young Fettercairn is like. Shove it in the back of the cupboard, or put it in my tea, or what have you, And I wouldn't say it was a waste of 30 quid because I'm personally certainly getting something out of it. But it's there's at the end of the day, there's so many other whiskies on the market of around about that price that I would just prefer to drink and prefer to sell. So again, like I said, it's nothing against the distillery, it's nothing against the company that bottled it. I think it was bottled far too young, but it's and there are going to be people that like this style of whiskey. Me, I'm just not one of them, I'm afraid. And it's noise that makes the world go round. I can't survive without that sound. Right, okay, the Macduff then. So, 21 years old, bottled at 50%. Let's see what this is going to store for us then, shall we? again, I mean, how old is this? 21? God. Again, it's got sort of, you know, some cereal, industrial nail polish remover. God, charmless is certainly the word springs to mind. Oily, rubbery, fainty. I mean, you don't even really get much in the way of sort of like maturity or of wood flavours or anything like that. I mean, it is just probably been aged in pretty well used bourbon casks, I would guess. Maybe quite tightly grained as well, because you would just you wouldn't expect this kind of oily cereal character at 21 years old. I mean, yeah, alright, it's a little bit of white licorice, but God, it's hard work. It really is hard. Again, sort of, it's just spirity, vodka-y like, hard. It's just hard. I mean, that's just the word that just keeps propping up whenever you sort of smell this type of whiskey. It is industrial, it is hard. There's no softness to it, there's no elegance, there's nothing, you know. It's just churned, well, I won't say it's churned out, but one gets the impression from tasting this that it's just basically churned out as a product rather than, you know, as, I'm probably going to get shocked by somebody that loves Macduff, but you know, that's the way it goes, I guess. So, but yeah, taste this, you know, that there are a whole load of distilleries that sort of like produce, you know, elegance, charming malts, but as sure as hell is one of them. Anyway. Saving Grace is quite peppery actually, but vapid, no real character. Bit oily, bit greasy, a little bit of that cereal character, some white licorice, like I said, you know, really peppery, really intensely peppery. Maybe not quite as industrial on the palate. I guess the 20 odd years in an oak cask has kind of you know, rounded off the edges somewhat, but it hasn't got a lot going for it. It is pretty watery, pretty vapid, you know, and that's pretty much about it. And I would imagine I mean, you know how much a 21-year-old whiskey is going to cost you. You're going to be shelling out somewhere in the best part of what, 90, 95, 99 pounds. Would you want to pay 99 pounds for something that tastes a bit watery and a bit vapid? I sure as hell wouldn't. And that's why, you know, I just wouldn't want to put that one on the shelf at all. Yes, again, you can, like I said, you can say that's the style of the distillery, but yeah, for 90 odd quid, I'd want, you know, a bit more than that's just the style of the distillery. So, and finally, Cardboard City, Tobermory. You know, people seem to be surprised when they come into the shop and ask, do I stock Tobermory? And I say, no. And they give me that kind of, why? You know, and it's, I guess there are quite a lot of people that do like it, you know. I've just never tasted one that I particularly enjoyed at all, full stop. I've probably tasted a couple of leches that were okay. Maybe sort of like, you know, shoving loads of peat in it, kind of like, you know, sometimes blankets that cardboardy character, but, you know, I God knows what they do with it, but anyway, enough of that, nose. Fainty, big chunk of apricot fruit though, slightly orangey, but it's kind of at the sides, you're kind of getting that alcohol vapour kind of lightly cardboardy. I mean, I will give it that this particular bottling doesn't reek of wet cardboard like some that I've come across. So in essence, you could almost say this is actually a okay bottling of Tobermory. But it's still there. It's you give it some air, give it some time, and it's just like wet cardboard. I mean, it's kind of muted. It's a bit oily. I mean that lovely sort of burst of apricot and citrus fruit is just gone. It's just like sniff to my nostrils turn inside out, and it's not coming back. Maybe it's a bit there. Maybe there's a little bit of honey. But sure, it's kind of you can when you smell this, it's kind of got a core of something, something pleasant and fruity, and but it's just all this kind of murkiness kind of wafting above it that just kind of like puts you off it completely. Slightly crystalline. It's what old is it? 15. Yeah. All I can say is the damn sight better than the distillery bottling. That's all I can say. I mean, the distillery bottling is pretty ropey. There you go. I've given that one away. This is obviously not a distillery bottling. Slightly rubbery, maybe just a little bit of peat. I got some of that sweet fruit again momentarily. It's a shame, because this could have been such a lovely malt if it just wasn't for that wet cardboard. Anyway, bit fusty, creamy wet cardboard and fust, bit earthy, bit musky, very bitter on the finish, a little bit of chocolate, but that is bitter, very dry, a little bit of coastal, there's a bit of fruit there, there's a little bit of apricot, bit of tangerine maybe, but you feel it sort of like right here, it's just like, and that's not the alcohol, it's anyway, not quite hard as nails, but again, it's the aftertaste, you've got that bitter finish and wet cardboard aftertaste, it's just sort of like, again, it's just not a whiskey you could really enjoy. You're sitting there thinking, where's the elegance in all of this, where's the interest? I mean, yeah, right, like I said, interest from a purely sort of analytical point of view, but certainly no interest from a sort of a sitting back in front of the fire kind of having a nice dram cigar kind of moment. Certainly I think I would choose something else rather than that particular one, but yeah, there you go. Right, okay, let's sum these up then, shall we? The Axis of Evil. Personally, I think there's a very good reason why I call them that, and hopefully this evening's tasting will have at least illuminated you for my reasonings for why these whiskies, these distilleries are grouped together as they are. Charmless, absolutely charmless. Well, maybe the exception of the Dufftown. I mean, the Deanston, that was just hard, spirity. Dufftown was probably the standout bottling of the five in actual fact. Not because it was the oldest bottling, but because it had something other than just the sort of like the spirit character. There was something else going on. It had complexity. There was wood notes. There was some sort of mature honey. And it was all quite balanced. And it's actually of all the five, it was the only one that I would consider, that I would sort of spend the money on and actually drink. Fettercairn, well, that was just too young. Again, you could say it's a perfect indicator of the distillery style, but I wouldn't want to pay 30 quid for that. The Macduff, I mean, that was a bit rough and ready, and the Tobermory, well, that was just Tobermory at the end of the day. I'm going to get pilloried for this. I know there's going to be probably a lot of people that sort of say you're wrong. Tobermory is a wonderful distillery. I love it, but I just don't. I just can't. It's, you know, one of these days I will find a nice bottling of Tobermory. But you know, one lives in hope, and it's like I said. I mean, I always approach every tasting with you know, no preconceptions. And to be honest with you, probably less with these particular distilleries. Whenever I come across, you know, a bottling of these or get sent a sample, I'll sort of look at it and think, you know, are you going to prove me wrong? You know, are you going to be the bottling that sort of finally sort of says, you know, I'm a lovely whiskey? And like I said, I've tasted, you know, one or two Dufftowns. Certainly the one that we've currently got on our list, the Douglas Lane Director's Cut Dufftown, which again is just Dufftown. I mean, there's no getting away from that distillery style, but there's so much more going on. There's just maturity, balance, and you know, it kind of offsets that sort of, you know, hard industrial style. As for the rest, I don't even know if I've ever tasted a bottling that I would say that I would want to particularly put on the shelves at all. And you know, I guess it's a shame, but when you think about how many distilleries there are in Scotland, you know, it's an inevitability. That, and I think at the end of the day, it's probably more about, I hate to say this, and I'm probably going to get pilloried for it, but I think a number of these distilleries basically focus on the quantity rather than the quality. Certainly when you've got a distillery that's, you know, producing whiskey that's predominantly going to go into blended whiskies and stuff like that, then it is all about sort of churning it out, getting the volume. There's I guess a parallel with the wine industry with regards to, you know, growers that sort of bottle their own product, and growers that sort of just grow grapes and sell it to a negotiant house. Basically, they're paid by the weight of grapes, so you know, they're focused on getting the maximum amount of grapes from a particular vine. Whereas if you're interested in the quality, the maximum amount, it doesn't matter. It's about the quality of the grapes, and you'll sacrifice you know, a number of grapes, you know, through green harvesting and that kind of thing, to make sure that the grapes that are remaining are sort of fully ripened and, you know, going to produce the best wine that's possible. And I think that applies to a number of distilleries. You know, a number of distilleries would sort of far rather distill a lot slower, and take the cut, you know, later, and take a very small middle cut, because they know that they can redistill it. You know, they will put it with the low wines, and they will redistill it. And it's not about the quantity that they produce. It's about wanting the best quality whiskey at the end of the day. And I think, like I say, I think a number of distilleries that are basically catering to the blending industry are purely just churning it out, because they know they have to get it out. They've got, you know, quotas to meet and all that kind of stuff. And my God's name, blenders would want to use a lot of this stuff is beyond me. But you know, stick that in with sort of like, you know, some heavy sherry cask stuff and all that kind of thing. Punt it out, sell it for sort of like a tenner a bottle. Bob's your uncle. You know, that's pretty much where it lies. You know. Might be a bit of a damning indictment upon the whiskey industry, but like a lot of things in life, you know, what you pay for is what you get. And to a certain extent, certainly blended whiskey wise, I think, but single malt wise, not always the case. So this is why I always want to taste before I put it on the shelf, because I want to know that it is a quality product and it is worth the price tag. You know. I keep saying it time and time again. Just because it's old does not make it good, does not make it worth £100 price tag. You know, it has got to be a good whiskey. It's got to have complexity. It's got to have interest. And sometimes a lot of these whiskies just don't come up to it. You know, for one reason or other. Not necessarily because they're poor whiskies, because you know they just basically spent too long in the cask or whatever. You know, but that's a whole other ramble, should we say. But anyway, coming back to this evening's topic. I hope you've enjoyed the tasting. If you agree with me on these, please let me know. If you disagree, equally just let me know. I'm big enough, I can take it on the chin. I've had plenty of people sort of, shall we say, chew me out for, giving a poor review to their whiskey. But it's life, isn't it? That's what happens when you review things and you put your views out there and on the line. So anyway. That's about it for this evening. So I'd just like to say I hope you had a lovely Christmas. I hope you had some wonderful drams, and certainly I know a number of you that came into the shop and spoke to myself or any of my colleagues probably went away with a lovely bottle. So as all I've got to have in a glass is Tobermory, I will bid you good evening and good dramming. Oh, I'm not doing this one again.
And he says, noises for heroes, you leave the music.